Welcome to the Billionaire's Choice. Subscribe and turn on notifications to enjoy more heartwarming stories of love and destiny. Let us know where you're watching from, and let's begin today's story. Sometimes the person you spent years trying to forget is the very person who never forgot you. Sienna Calloway had imagined many versions of what coming home might feel like. Relief, comfort, maybe even hope. What she had not imagined was failure. Yet that was exactly what sat beside her in the passenger seat as she drove through the familiar roads leading back to Oak Ridge. A cardboard box filled with office supplies rested on the seat beside her. The company laptop was gone. The employee badge was gone. The marketing career she had spent 8 years building in Boston was gone too. Outside the windshield, rolling hills stretched beneath a bright October sky. The trees glowed with shades of gold, orange, and crimson. Oak Ridge looked exactly as she remembered. The same white church near the town square. The same bakery on Main Street. The same water tower rising above the rooftops. Everything looked frozen in time. Everything except her. At 30 years old, she had expected to arrive home for holidays and short visits. Not because she had lost her job and needed a place to regroup. Her mother had insisted she come back. "You need a break," she had said. "And your father misses you." Sienna smiled despite herself as she turned onto the familiar country road leading toward the family farm. Maybe her mother was right. Maybe a few weeks away from Boston was exactly what she needed. The farmhouse appeared at the end of the gravel driveway. White siding, green shutters, a wraparound porch. Home. The words settled softly in her chest. Before she could step out of the car, the front door burst open. Her mother hurried outside with tears already forming in her eyes. "Sienna." A moment later, she was wrapped in a hug that smelled like cinnamon and lavender. "It is so good to have you home." Her father followed more slowly, smiling beneath his weathered baseball cap. "Welcome back, kiddo." For the first time in weeks, Sienna felt herself breathe a little easier. The afternoon passed quickly, unpacking, catching up, listening to stories about neighbors she barely remembered. By early evening, her mother realized they were missing ingredients for dinner and asked if she would run into town. Happy to escape for a few minutes, Sienna grabbed her keys and headed toward Main Street. The sun hung low above the horizon as she parked near the town square. The streets were busier than usual. People stood outside storefronts. Small groups gathered near the courthouse steps. Something was happening. Curious, she crossed the street and followed the crowd. Then she heard the sound of engines. Several black luxury SUVs rolled slowly into the square. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Phones appeared in people's hands. Sienna frowned. Oak Ridge was not the kind of place where motorcades showed up. The first SUV stopped near the courthouse entrance. A driver stepped out and opened the rear door. The man who emerged instantly stole the attention of everyone watching. Tall, confident, dressed in a tailored charcoal coat, dark hair touched by the late afternoon sunlight. For one impossible second, Sienna forgot how to breathe. Her entire world narrowed to a single face. Grayson Whitmore, the boy who had once sat beside her on the old dock at Willow Lake. The boy who had promised they would leave Oak Ridge together someday. The boy who vanished 12 years ago without a goodbye. Only he was not a boy anymore. He was one of the most successful billionaires in the country. Grayson adjusted his coat and turned toward the crowd. Then his eyes found hers. Everything stopped. The noise, the movement, the years. Surprise flashed across his face. Then something deeper, something that looked almost painful. Sienna felt her heart pounding against her ribs. 12 years of unanswered questions rushed back at once. 12 years of anger. 12 years of wondering why she had never been enough for him to stay. Neither moved. Neither spoke. They simply stared at each other across the town square while autumn leaves drifted through the air between them. And standing there beneath the golden October sky, Sienna had no way of knowing that Grayson Whitmore had returned. To Oak Ridge, carrying a secret powerful enough to change everything she believed about the past. Sienna did not remember leaving the town square. One moment she was standing there staring at Grayson Whitmore for the first time in 12 years. The next, she was sitting alone inside her car with both hands gripping the steering wheel. Her heart still refused to slow down. Outside, Oak Ridge continued moving as if nothing extraordinary had happened. People crossed the street. Store owners locked their doors. Cars rolled past beneath the warm glow of streetlights beginning to flicker on. Yet for Sienna, everything had changed. Because the ghost she had spent years trying to bury was suddenly standing in the middle of her hometown, very much alive. She drove home in silence. The familiar roads blurred past the windshield while memories she thought she had forgotten returned with painful clarity. She remembered football games beneath Friday night lights. She remembered summer afternoons at Willow Lake. She remembered sitting on the hood of Grayson's old pickup truck counting stars while making plans for a future they believed would last forever. Back then, everyone in Oak Ridge knew their story. Sienna Calloway and Grayson Whitmore. The girl who loved books and the boy who dreamed bigger than the town around him. They had been inseparable, at least until the day he vanished. No goodbye, no explanation, no letter, nothing. The memory still hurt, more than she wanted to admit. When she arrived at the farmhouse, her mother immediately noticed something was wrong. "Sweetheart," she asked while setting dinner plates on the table. "You look like you saw a ghost." Sienna forced a smile. "Maybe I did." Her father glanced up from his chair. "You saw Grayson." It was not a question. Sienna stared. "How did you know?" Her father chuckled softly. "Small town." Her mother exchanged a quick look with him. A look Sienna could not quite understand. "He has been back several times this year," her mother said carefully. "For business." Sienna sat down. Business. The Whitmore Foundation funded the new library expansion and the community center renovation, her father added. He helped save 3 local farms after last year's drought. Sienna frowned. None of that fit the version of Grayson she had carried in her head. The Grayson she remembered had chosen wealth over loyalty, ambition over love. Yet the man everyone described sounded generous, thoughtful even. She did not like the confusion that created. Later that night, unable to sleep, she wandered into her old bedroom. Most things remained exactly where she left them years ago. The same shelves, the same curtains, the same small desk beneath the window. Her eyes drifted toward the top drawer. She hesitated before opening it. Buried beneath old notebooks and photographs sat a silver pocket watch. Her chest tightened instantly. Grayson had given it to her during their senior year of high school, the day before graduation. She picked it up carefully. The metal felt cool against her fingertips. The watch had not worked in years. It had stopped at exactly 8:17. The same night Grayson disappeared from Oak Ridge. Sienna stared at the frozen hands for a long moment. Then she quietly slipped the watch into her pocket. The next morning she headed into town early, hoping a walk might clear her thoughts. Instead, fate seemed determined to test her. She was halfway through ordering coffee at the local bakery when the front door opened. A hush swept through the room. She did not need to turn around. Somehow she already knew. Grayson stepped inside. Conversations immediately started around him. People greeted him warmly. He shook hands, smiled politely, thanked the owner by name. The entire scene felt strangely natural, as though he belonged here, as though he had never left. Then his gaze found hers. For a brief second, everything else disappeared. He started walking toward her. Sienna's pulse quickened. 12 years of unanswered questions stood between them. And for the first time since seeing him again, she realized something even more unsettling than his return. She wanted answers. And judging by the look in Grayson's eyes, he had been waiting a very long time to give them. Sienna had every intention of leaving the bakery before Grayson reached her table. Unfortunately, her feet refused to cooperate. She stood frozen beside the counter while the distance between them disappeared one step at a time. The conversations around them faded into background noise. Even the smell of fresh coffee seemed distant. All she could focus on was the man walking toward her. 12 years had changed him. The teenage boy she remembered had become someone polished and confident. Yet there was something familiar in the way he looked at her. Something she recognized immediately. "Sienna," he said softly. Hearing her name in his voice sent an unexpected ache through her chest. Grayson. Neither seemed sure what to say next. Finally, he smiled. It was small, careful, almost uncertain. "You look exactly the same." Sienna raised an eyebrow. "That is not possible." "Maybe not exactly." His smile widened slightly, but close enough. She hated that the old charm still worked. For a second, she almost smiled back. Then the memory of 12 years of silence returned. The wall around her heart snapped back into place. "I should go." Something flickered across his face. Disappointment. Regret. She could not tell. "Can we talk?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. "Talk. Just for a few minutes." Sienna stared at him. "After 12 years?" Grayson held her gaze. "Yes. After 12 years. She wanted to say no. She should have said no. But curiosity was becoming more difficult to ignore. Before she could answer, the bakery owner approached carrying a tray of pastries. Mr. Whitmore, thank you again for everything you did for the youth center. Grayson nodded politely. Happy to help. The owner turned toward Sienna. Your friend has done more for this town than anyone in years. Friend. The word felt strangely wrong. Grayson and Sienna exchanged a brief look before the owner walked away. Sienna noticed several people waving at him from across the room. He greeted each of them by name. It was impossible not to notice how comfortable he seemed in Oak Ridge, as if he belonged here, as if he had never abandoned it. Or her. Eventually, she folded her arms. Everyone seems to love you. Grayson looked down at his coffee. Not everyone. The answer surprised her. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. For a split second, something changed in his expression. Concern. Maybe even tension. Then it disappeared as quickly as it had come. I need to take this. He hesitated. But I hope we can talk soon. Sienna watched him leave the bakery. Outside, a black sedan waited near the curb. A silver-haired man stepped out carrying a leather briefcase. The two exchanged a few quiet words before climbing into the vehicle together. Sienna frowned. The man did not look like an employee. He looked more like an attorney. The image lingered in her mind for the rest of the day. Over the following week, Grayson seemed to appear everywhere. At the grocery store, at the library, at a community fundraiser held near the town square. Each encounter left her more confused than before. The billionaire she remembered as selfish seemed determined to spend his time helping everyone around him. One afternoon, she stopped by her parents' farm and found a construction crew repairing damaged fencing near the north pasture. What happened? She asked her father. He smiled. Grant from the Whitmore Foundation. Sienna blinked. Grayson paid for this? Would not take credit for it either. Her father looked toward the field. Good man. Sienna glanced away. She was not ready to agree. Yet doubts were beginning to form. That evening, she sat alone on the porch swing, holding the silver pocket watch in her hand. The frozen hand still pointed to 8:17. The same moment time had seemed to stop years ago. A cool breeze drifted across the fields. Then headlights appeared at the end of the driveway. A black sedan rolled slowly toward the farmhouse before stopping near the road. Sienna recognized it immediately. Grayson's car. He stepped out alone. No bodyguards. No assistants. Just him. For several seconds, he remained standing beside the vehicle as though debating whether to approach. Then he looked toward the porch. Their eyes met across the fading light of the evening. And for the first time since returning home, Sienna realized she was no longer asking why Grayson Whitmore had come back to Oak Ridge. She was beginning to wonder what he was so desperately trying to tell her. The black sedan remained parked near the end of the driveway, while the evening sky faded from gold to deep blue. Sienna sat motionless on the porch swing, the silver pocket watch resting in her hand. Across the distance, Grayson stood beside his car as though fighting a battle she could not see. Finally, he took a slow breath and walked toward the farmhouse. Every step seemed deliberate, careful. By the time he reached the porch, Sienna's pulse had already quickened. I was not sure you would stay, he said. She looked up. I was not sure you would get out of the car. A faint smile appeared before quickly fading. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt strangely familiar. Years ago, they had never needed words to understand each other. Now words seemed harder than ever. Can we talk? Grayson asked quietly. Sienna glanced toward the fields stretching behind him. That depends. On what? Whether you plan on actually answering questions this time. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger. Regret. Fair enough. He sat at the opposite end of the swing. The distance between them felt both small and enormous. Crickets chirped in the darkness. A light breeze moved through the trees. For the first few minutes, they spoke only about simple things. Boston, Oak Ridge, her parents, community projects, safe subjects. Yet Sienna could feel something deeper waiting beneath the surface. Eventually, she stopped pretending. Why are you really back? Grayson looked away toward the horizon. Business. She immediately laughed. That is not an answer. He rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. Partly business. And the other part? The hesitation lasted only a second. Personal reasons. Sienna folded her arms. You are still doing it. Doing what? Giving answers that reveal nothing. The comment landed harder than she intended. Grayson lowered his eyes. Some things are complicated. 12 years is complicated. The words escaped before she could stop them. Silence followed. Heavy silence. The kind that carried old wounds. Grayson stared at the porch floor for several seconds before speaking. I know I hurt you. Sienna felt her chest tighten. Do you? His gaze lifted to meet hers. Not a day passed when I did not think about it. The honesty caught her off guard. Before she could respond, headlights appeared at the far end of the driveway. Another vehicle slowly approached the farmhouse. A dark luxury sedan. Grayson's expression changed immediately. The warmth disappeared. The tension returned. The car stopped near the road. The same silver-haired man Sienna had seen before stepped out carrying a leather briefcase. He looked directly toward Grayson. Mr. Whitmore. His tone sounded professional. Formal. Sorry to interrupt. Grayson stood. What is it? The attorney walked closer and lowered his voice. Even so, Sienna caught fragments of the conversation. Documents. Signatures. Meeting tomorrow. Estate review. The words meant little individually. Together they created questions. Many questions. After a brief exchange, the attorney handed Grayson a thick folder. Grayson accepted it with visible reluctance. Once the man returned to his vehicle and drove away, silence settled over the porch again. Sienna looked at the folder. You seem to spend a lot of time with lawyers. Grayson did not smile. More than I would like. Why? His fingers tightened slightly around the folder. It is complicated. There it was again. The same answer. The same wall. Frustration rose inside her. You know, everyone in town talks about how generous you are now. Grayson looked surprised. Generous. The library. The farms. The community center. She shook her head. But nobody seems to know what you are actually doing here. For a moment, he simply stared at her. Then something unexpected happened. He looked tired. Not physically tired. Emotionally exhausted. Like a man carrying a burden for too long. I wish I could explain everything tonight, he said softly. I really do. Sienna searched his face for signs of dishonesty. She found none. Only sadness. Genuine sadness. It unsettled her more than any lie could have. A few minutes later, Grayson stood to leave. He paused near the porch steps. There is a fundraising gala at the town hall on Saturday. Sienna raised an eyebrow. And I will be there. He hesitated. Maybe you could come. Before she could answer, he walked back toward his car. The engine started. Headlights swept across the fields. Then he disappeared into the darkness. Sienna remained on the porch long after he left. The silver pocket watch rested in one hand. Questions filled her mind. Lawyers. Secret meetings. Estate documents. Personal reasons. None of it made sense. Yet one thing was becoming impossible to ignore. Grayson Whitmore was hiding something. And whatever that secret was, it seemed to follow him everywhere he went. Saturday arrived wrapped in crisp autumn air and bright blue skies. From the moment Sienna woke up, she told herself she had no intention of attending the fundraising gala at town hall. There was no reason to go. She barely knew anyone involved. Besides, the last thing she needed was another evening trying to understand Grayson Whitmore. Yet by 6 o'clock that evening, she found herself standing in front of her bedroom mirror deciding between two dresses. Her mother noticed immediately. I thought you were staying home. Sienna sighed. I am just being polite. Her mother smiled knowingly, but said nothing. An hour later, the town hall glowed beneath strings of warm lights. Cars filled the parking lot. Music drifted through the cool evening air. Oak Ridge residents gathered inside wearing their best clothes, celebrating another successful year of community projects. As Sienna stepped into the ballroom, conversations filled the room. Local business owners mingled beside teachers, farmers, and community leaders. Everything felt elegant without losing the charm of a small town. Then she saw him. Grayson stood near the center of the room, speaking with several donors. A tailored black suit replaced his usual coat. The years seemed to disappear for a moment. He looked almost exactly like the young man she remembered from senior prom. Almost. Then he turned and noticed her. The conversation around him seemed to fade. A slow smile appeared. Not the confident smile he offered everyone else. Something softer. More genuine. Before she could reconsider her decision to attend, he was already walking toward her. You came. Sienna raised an eyebrow. You sound surprised. Hopeful is probably a better word. The honesty caught her off guard. For a moment, neither moved. Then Grayson extended his hand. Would you like to walk outside for a minute? She should have refused. Instead, she nodded. Minutes later, they stood on the balcony overlooking the town square. The sounds of the gala drifted softly through the open doors behind them. Below, streetlights illuminated the quiet streets of Oak Ridge. For the first time all evening, they were alone. "I forgot how beautiful this place is," Sienna said quietly. "I never forgot." She glanced toward him. Something about his tone made her chest tighten. Grayson leaned against the railing. "Do you remember Willow Lake?" A small laugh escaped her. "How could I forget? We practically lived there every summer." The memory brought unexpected warmth. They talked for nearly an hour. Not about the past they had lost. About the moments before everything fell apart. Favorite teachers. Football games. Summer jobs. Friends who had moved away. The conversation felt effortless. Familiar. Dangerous. Because with every passing minute, Sienna found herself lowering the walls she had spent 12 years building. Eventually, she reached into her purse and pulled out the silver pocket watch. The metal reflected the balcony lights. Grayson's expression immediately changed. "You still have it." "I almost threw it away 100 times." His gaze remained fixed on the watch. "But you did not." "No." She turned it over in her hands. "It stopped working years ago." Grayson accepted it carefully when she offered it to him. His thumb brushed across the engraved surface. For several seconds he said nothing. Then a strange sadness entered his eyes. "I remember buying this." Sienna smiled faintly. "You spent 3 months saving for it. Worth every dollar." Their eyes met. The moment lingered longer than either intended. Then Grayson looked away first. He handed the watch back and slipped one hand into his pocket. Sienna noticed tension returning to his expression. The same tension she had seen whenever lawyers appeared. Whenever difficult questions surfaced. Before she could ask, "What was wrong?" movement below caught her attention. A black sedan pulled quietly into the parking lot. The silver-haired attorney stepped out carrying a thick leather folder. He looked directly toward the balcony, toward Grayson. Instantly, Grayson's entire posture changed. The warmth vanished. Concern replaced it. "I need to take care of something," he said. Sienna frowned. "Another meeting?" He hesitated. "Something like that." She watched as he started toward the doors. Then he stopped and turned back. For a brief second, he looked as though he wanted to say something important, something he had been holding back for years. Instead, he simply nodded and disappeared inside. Sienna remained alone on the balcony. Below, the attorney entered the building carrying the folder. The silver pocket watch rested in her hand. The cool metal felt heavier than before, because for the first time, she had the unmistakable feeling that whatever secret Grayson was hiding had something to do with her. And whatever truth waited inside those folders was getting closer to being revealed. The questions followed Sienna everywhere after the gala. No matter how hard she tried to focus on ordinary things, her thoughts kept returning to the attorney, the folders, and the look on Grayson's face whenever legal documents appeared. It was the expression of someone carrying responsibility, or fear, maybe both. 3 days later, a cold rain settled over Oak Ridge. Sienna volunteered to help her mother deliver homemade pies to a church fundraiser on the other side of town. The errand should have taken less than an hour. Instead, it became the moment everything started to change. After dropping off the last pie, she stopped at a small coffee shop near the courthouse to escape the rain. Through the front window, she noticed a familiar black sedan parked across the street. Grayson's car. Curiosity stirred immediately. She watched as the silver-haired attorney stepped out carrying several thick folders. A few seconds later, Grayson emerged from a nearby office building. The two men exchanged serious words before entering the courthouse together. Sienna frowned. Another legal meeting. Another. Secret. The rain continued falling steadily against the glass. She told herself to ignore it. She told herself it was none of her business. Yet 20 minutes later, when she left the coffee shop, she found herself walking past the courthouse entrance. The lobby was nearly empty. A receptionist sat behind a desk, while several people moved through the hallways carrying paperwork. Sienna was about to leave when she spotted a folder resting on a nearby bench. It looked familiar. The same dark leather material the attorney had carried. Perhaps someone had accidentally forgotten it. She picked it up, intending to hand it to the receptionist. As she did, several papers shifted slightly inside. One page slid partially into view. Her breath caught. Printed near the top was a name she knew immediately. Calloway Family Farm. For a moment, she simply stared. Surely it was a coincidence. Yet beneath the title, she recognized her father's full name. Confusion surged through her. Before she could look closer, a voice spoke behind her. "Miss, is that yours?" Startled, Sienna quickly closed the folder and handed it to the receptionist. No, I think someone left it. She walked out of the courthouse moments later, but her pulse refused to settle. Why would her family's farm appear in legal documents connected to Grayson? The question haunted her for the rest of the day. That evening, she sat at the kitchen table while her parents prepared dinner. Finally, she could not keep the question to herself any longer. Has Grayson ever helped the farm financially? She asked. Her father paused, just for a second, yet it was enough for her to notice. Why would you ask that? He replied. Just curious. Her father exchanged a quick glance with her mother. The same glance she had noticed before. The same silent conversation that always seemed to stop when she entered the room. He has supported a lot of families around town, her father said carefully. Including ours? The room grew noticeably quieter. Her mother busied herself arranging plates. Her father looked toward the window. Neither answered directly. That silence told Sienna more than words could. Later that night, she could not sleep. Around 11 o'clock, she stepped onto the porch with the silver pocket watch in her hand. Rain clouds had cleared, revealing a sky filled with stars. She turned the watch over thoughtfully. 12 years ago, she believed Grayson had abandoned her for money. Now she was no longer certain she understood any part of the story. Her phone vibrated suddenly. A text message appeared on the screen. The sender's name made her heart skip. Grayson. The message was short. Meet me tomorrow at Willow Lake. There is something you deserve to know. Sienna stared at the words for a long time. Then her gaze drifted to the frozen hands of the pocket watch. For the first time since coming home, she had the unmistakable feeling that the answers she had been searching for were finally within reach. What she did not know was that the truth waiting beside that lake would change everything she believed about Grayson Whitmore, her family, and the last 12 years of her life. The next afternoon arrived colder than expected. Gray clouds drifted slowly across the sky as Sienna followed the familiar path leading to Willow Lake. Every step seemed heavier than the last. The text message from Grayson had replayed in her mind all night. There is something you deserve to know. Simple words. Yet somehow, they carried the weight of 12 unanswered years. The lake appeared through the trees exactly as she remembered. Calm water. Weathered dock. Golden leaves scattered across the shoreline. Grayson was already there waiting. His hands rested in the pockets of a dark coat. When he saw her approaching, he straightened slightly. Neither smiled. The moment felt too important for that. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. Sienna stopped a few feet away. I almost did not. He nodded as though he understood completely. For several seconds, neither spoke. The breeze moved across the water. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called from the trees. Finally, Sienna folded her arms. I saw my family's name in legal documents. Grayson lowered his eyes. I know. Then start talking. There was no anger in her voice anymore. Only exhaustion. Grayson took a slow breath and stared across the lake. Everything you think happened 12 years ago is wrong. The words landed like a stone. Sienna felt her heartbeat quicken. Then tell me what happened. He remained silent for several moments before speaking again. A few months before graduation, I found out something about my family. His voice sounded distant, as though he were reliving memories he wished he could forget. The man I thought was my uncle was actually my father. Sienna blinked. What? Grayson nodded. My mother kept it secret my entire life. He looked toward the water. And my father happened to be Arthur Whitmore. The name needed no explanation. Arthur Whitmore had built one of the largest business empires in the country. Sienna stared in disbelief. You are saying you suddenly became the heir to the Whitmore fortune? Not immediately. His expression darkened. Because the moment the truth became public, the lawsuit started. Sienna listened without speaking. Other family members challenged the inheritance. Business rivals became involved. Attorneys warned my father that anyone close to me could become a target of legal investigations. He paused. Including you. A chill ran through her. Me? Grayson nodded slowly. And your parents? The lake suddenly felt very quiet. I do not understand. One of the legal teams discovered that your father was struggling financially after several bad harvest seasons. Sienna's eyes widened. She had never known how serious those problems had been. Grayson continued. The attorneys believed anyone connected to me could be accused of receiving financial benefits or hidden assets. They were looking for any excuse to challenge my position. His jaw tightened. If they dragged your family into court, your farm could have been destroyed by legal costs alone. Sienna struggled to process what she was hearing. So what did you do? For the first time, Pain appeared openly in his eyes. I left. The answer was almost a whisper. I walked away from everything that mattered before they could hurt you. Tears immediately filled her eyes. Without saying anything, I wanted to. His voice cracked slightly. God knows I wanted to. He looked away. But every attorney involved told me the same thing. The less contact I had with you, the safer you would be. Sienna felt years of anger colliding with a truth she had never imagined. You could have written. I did. Her breath caught. Grayson reached into his coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. The edges looked worn from age. The night before I left, he held it carefully. I wrote a letter explaining everything. Sienna stared at the paper. Her heart pounded. What happened to it? Grayson looked at her with a sadness so deep it seemed impossible to fake. That is the question I spent 12 years trying to answer. The wind swept across the lake as Sienna stood frozen beside the dock. Because in that moment, she realized something even more shocking than Grayson's secret. Someone had made sure she never received the truth. Sienna barely remembered leaving Willow Lake. The conversation replayed endlessly inside her mind during the drive home. Arthur Whitmore. Lawsuits. Hidden inheritance battles. The letter. Most of all, the letter. For 12 years, she had built an entire version of her life around the belief that Grayson chose money over her. Now that belief was beginning to collapse. The farmhouse felt unusually quiet when she arrived. Her mother was preparing dinner. Her father sat at the kitchen table reading farm reports. Everything appeared normal. Yet Sienna suddenly found herself looking at her parents differently, especially her father. She hated the suspicion forming inside her, but she could not ignore it. After dinner, she found him alone in the barn repairing a piece of equipment. The setting sun painted the wooden walls in shades of gold and amber. For several moments, she simply stood there watching him work. Then she finally spoke. Did Grayson ever give you a letter for me? The wrench slipped from her father's hand. The metallic sound echoed through the barn. Silence followed. Long silence. Slowly, he looked up. In that instant, Sienna knew. The answer was already written across his face. Her heart sank. Dad. His shoulders slumped. Years seemed to settle onto him all at once. I was hoping this day would never come. The words felt like a punch to the chest. Tears immediately filled her eyes. He did he not? Her father lowered himself onto an old wooden stool. Yes. The single word shattered 12 years of assumptions. Sienna could barely breathe. You had it. He nodded. All this time. Another nod. Anger surged through her. Not the hot anger she once felt toward Grayson. This was different. Deeper. Why? Her voice trembled. Why would you do that? Her father stared at the floor for several seconds before answering. Because I thought I was protecting you. The explanation only made everything worse. Protecting me from what? He looked up. Regret filled his eyes. From a future filled with uncertainty. Sienna shook her head. That was not your choice to make. I know. You let me hate him. I know. Tears rolled freely down her cheeks now. Her father walked toward an old storage cabinet near the back wall. From the top shelf, he removed a small wooden box covered in dust. The sight alone made her stomach tighten. He carried it back carefully and placed it in her hands. I never opened it, he said quietly. I could not bring myself to. With trembling fingers, Sienna lifted the lid. Inside rested a folded letter and something else. The silver pocket watch froze in her hand. For a moment, she simply stared. Then realization struck. The watch she carried and the watch inside the box were not identical. This one had a slightly different engraving. Her pulse quickened. She unfolded the letter first. The handwriting was unmistakable. Grayson's. Dear Sienna. The tears came immediately. She read every word. He explained everything. The inheritance battle. The threats from attorneys. His fear that her family would become collateral damage in a war they never asked to join. Most painful of all was a single sentence written near the end. If staying away is the only way to keep you safe, then I will spend the rest of my life carrying that choice. By the time she reached the final line, she could no longer see through her tears. Then she noticed a note attached to the second pocket watch. Open the back panel. Confused, she followed the instruction. A hidden compartment clicked open. Inside rested a tiny folded piece of paper. Sienna carefully unfolded it. The message was only a few lines long. It described a legal trust established years ago through anonymous channels. Funds that had quietly helped preserve the Callaway farm during its hardest years. Her breath caught. The signature at the bottom belonged to Arthur Whitmore. Suddenly everything made sense. The financial support, the legal documents, the meetings with attorneys. Grayson had not returned to take something from her family. He had returned because his father's final estate documents officially transferred responsibility for that trust to him. The secret he had been protecting all along was not about wealth. It was about sacrifice, love, and a promise was made 12 years earlier. As Sienna sat alone in the fading light of the barn, holding the letter against her chest, she realized the greatest misunderstanding of her life had finally ended. Now only one question remains. What would she do with the truth? The following morning, Sienna drove to Willow Lake before sunrise. The letter rested on the passenger seat beside her. So did the second pocket watch she had discovered inside the wooden box. Neither item felt real. Even now, part of her struggled to accept that 12 years of pain had been built upon a misunderstanding. The eastern horizon slowly brightened as she followed the familiar path toward the dock. A thin layer of mist drifted across the water. Everything felt quiet, peaceful, as though the lake itself had been waiting for this moment. Grayson was already there. He stood at the end of the dock staring across the water, hands resting against the railing. When he heard her footsteps, he turned. Surprise crossed his face. Then concern. Then hope. Sienna stopped a few feet away. For a long moment neither spoke. She simply held up the letter. Grayson's eyes immediately found it. The color drained from his face. You found it. She nodded. Tears already blurred her vision. My father kept it. Grayson closed his eyes briefly. Years of questions seemed to settle between them all at once. When he looked at her again, there was no anger in his expression. Only sadness. I always wondered. Sienna stepped closer. You wrote to me. Yes. You tried to explain. Yes. Her voice trembled. And I spent 12 years believing you left because I was not enough. Pain flashed across his face. Sienna. She shook her head. Do not. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Do not apologize for something that was never your fault. For several seconds, neither moved. The wind swept gently across the lake. Golden sunlight began spilling over the distant trees. Finally, Grayson looked down. I should have fought harder. You were 22 years old. His eyes lifted to hers. I still should have fought harder. The honesty nearly broke her heart. Slowly, she reached into her coat pocket and removed the original silver pocket watch, the one he had given her before graduation. Then she placed the second watch beside it in her palm. Grayson's expression softened immediately. You found that too. Sienna nodded. I know about the trust. He looked away toward the water. My father felt responsible for what happened. And you spent years protecting my family. It was never about obligation. His voice was quiet, steady. It was about you. The truth settled between them like sunlight breaking through clouds. For the first time since returning to Oak Ridge, Sienna felt the last pieces of anger disappear. All that remained was grief for the years they lost, and gratitude that they still had this moment. Several months passed. Winter arrived, then slowly gave way to spring. The legal matters surrounding the Whitmore estate were finally resolved. The trust supporting the Callaway farm was transferred openly and transparently. For the first time, there were no secrets, no hidden documents, no unanswered questions. Grayson remained in Oak Ridge more often than not. What began as occasional visits became something permanent. He invested in local businesses, expanded scholarship programs, supported community projects. But the moments that mattered most never appeared in newspapers or foundation reports. They happened quietly. Morning coffee on the farmhouse porch, walks around Willow Lake, long conversations beneath starlit skies, small moments that slowly rebuilt what time had taken away. One bright afternoon in late May, Grayson asked Sienna to meet him at the lake. The request seemed ordinary, yet something in his voice told her otherwise. When she arrived, she found him standing beside the old dock. The repaired pocket watch rested in his hand. Unlike before, the hands were moving. Time was no longer frozen. As she approached, he smiled. The nervous smile of a man who suddenly seemed far less confident than any billionaire should. Do you remember what you told me the day I gave you this watch? He asked. Sienna laughed softly through unexpected tears. That you spent too much money on it. After that, she thought for a moment, then remembered. I said time only matters when you spend it with the right person. Grayson nodded. Slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small ring box. Sienna's breath caught immediately. For 12 years, he said quietly, I believed I had lost my chance. Then somehow life gave me another one. He opened the box. Sunlight danced across the ring. Sienna Calloway, will you spend the rest of your time with me? Tears streamed freely down her cheeks. Yet her answer came without hesitation. Yes. The word echoed across the water. Months later, family and friends gathered beside Willow Lake beneath a warm summer sky. Laughter filled the air. Music drifted across the shoreline. And as Sienna and Grayson stood together surrounded by the people they loved, the repaired pocket watch rested safely in her hand, ticking steadily with each passing second. Time had not erased their story. It had simply brought them back to where they were always meant to be. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to the Billionaire's Choice. Every week, we bring you heartwarming stories of love, destiny, and life-changing decisions. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new story.